Nope, this is live out. So Alex is coming to us live, going to record this session here so we can share it out through our newsletter and our blog later so that more folks can access it. We're just trying to expand all the ways that we can reach the ODevs community. So thanks for joining us and trying this out today. This is our first Zoom recorded online repeat of in-person session. So Alex, I'll keep managing sort of the chat and admitting folks, but I will hand it on over to you. So
Excellent. Yeah. Are you sure this isn't live? Because I'm pretty sure I'm a rope. No, okay, I'm done. I was gonna make a joke about being an AI, but no, it's poor taste. Um, should I just get started, or want to give a few more minutes, or?
I think jump on in. I think folks will come in just sort of as they come. But I know I got a lot of messages where folks were signing up just so they could get the notification for the recording. So,
Yeah,
perils
no,
of trying to do it live, but promising that you could watch it after the fact. So
no, this is awesome. This is gonna be great. I think that a lot of people have been wanting a recording of this, including myself. So I'm really happy that we got to do this. And thanks so much, Caitlin, for setting this up so that we can all have this kind of document, and I can move on with my life and stop giving this talk. Give the
there you
next
go.
one. All right. So today we're going to talk about how to vibe code responsibly. Really, that's a bit of a misnomer. We're going to talk about what vibe coding is, and we're going to talk about exactly what the purpose of this talk is. This talk is not really to teach you how to vibe code. It's more so how to teach you how to leverage AI code assist on your production code bases to make maintainable, understandable, I don't want to say slow and steady, but like fast yet steady progress in production environments, which is, at least the most value I get out of coding. And I expect most people in ODevs are really trying to move the needle in their production environments. Oh, yeah. So a little bit about me. My name is Alex. I currently am the lead AI engineer at P, working heavily with Jacques. A little bit more about my background. I used to work at Microsoft on the Xbox team. And then after that, I did a small stint where I got to work at a startup that was partnered with Kanye West, called the STEM Player, which was a really cool experience. So a lot of experience, programming throughout my relatively small number of days. All right, let's get into it. So today we're going to talk about a few things. The first we're going to talk about is the problem with coding agents as they stand today. The problem isn't code. It's actually what I call alignment. Probably the core problem with all AI is alignment. Next, we're going to talk about the fix. I have a 5-phase, what I call workflow prompt to enforce collaboration, i.e. cursor rules, if you're familiar with cursor. And then finally, I'm going to give you a little bonus on how to use Super Whisper to what I call build at the speed of ramble. As you can tell, I love to ramble. So it's a natural fit for me. Maybe it is for you as well. All right, so what exactly is vibe coding, right? I mentioned we're not going to really teach you how to vibe code, so I think it's important to describe what exactly vibe coding is. So on the far right, we have what is called full vibes. This is really what vibe coding is. It's hands-off coding where the AI writes everything, and you almost forget that code even underpins your application. So it's basically Andre Kaparthi kind of coined the term on Twitter on a random day of the week in February. And yeah, he just said is like basically it's great for side projects. You can just tell the AI what you want to build. It'll just crank out file after file after file. And you just forget the code ever existed. You just hit, you just talk to it, say, build this for me. And then you accept all and keep going. And if there's a bug, you just keep working with the AI. You never actually interact with the code at all. On the other side of the spectrum, we have what I call no vibes, which is also known as OG coding. It's what we all were doing before the days of ChatGPT. As you start to move inward, you get a little bit more vibey, right? We have not vibey enough and too vibey. So not vibey enough is basically like using AI for search. So instead of going to Google to try to, resolve your bug, you just be hitting up ChatGPT. I think we're all very familiar with this at this point. Too vibey is kind of very similar to full vibes. The only difference between full vibes and too vibey is with too vibey, you're using raw agent mode driven coding IDE. So really the only difference is you're doing it inside of an IDE as opposed to, for example, something like Lovable or Bolt, where you never actually see the code at all, and it just is building the application behind the scenes. With 2Vibe, you're still in an IDE like VS Code or Cursor. The difference is you're just hitting accept all and moving on to the next change. It's really the same thing is happening. The only difference is you're aware of the code, you're seeing the code. You may not be verifying it or checking the code, but you at least are aware that there is code underpinning your application. Now, there's something right in the middle called the perfectly balanced vibes. What are they? We'll get into it. But before we get into it, I want to really dive into this problem that I just talked about with raw agent mode. So realistically, I guess, I don't know if we can do a show of hands on Zoom. I also can't really, maybe I can see. Can we do a show of hands? Can I get some reactions? Here, let me drop a reaction myself. Woo! Okay. So who has, we'll start with this simple one. Who's used Cursor? Just give me a clap if you use Cursor, or a thumbs up, sure. Excellent. So a few people have used Cursor. Okay, good. A good number of people have used Cursor. Fantastic. So who's had a positive change in Cursor? Give me a thumbs up if you had a positive change in Cursor. Now, okay, we're going to stop that one. Now give me a thumbs up if you've had a negative change in Cursor or Windsurf or VS Code or whatever coding agent you're typically used to using. Okay, well, I've definitely had a negative change, so I'm going to put a thumb up for that. Or maybe there's like the open mouth one. We'll do an open mouth for a negative change. So yeah, the thing is this. Typically, when you're working with AI coding agents, right, you'll get some changes that are helpful, some changes that are random, and some that are very destructive to your code base. This actually happened to me one time. I was working on like a small feature in my code base, and my coding agent ran into a file for an unrelated feature and just said, "Yeah, I don't really know what this is. I don't know why this is here. I'll just delete it." Deleted a full file for another feature in my code base. And if I was essentially just hitting accept all, accept all, accept all, I never would have noticed that. It's simply destructive change. And so it's a little difficult about working with raw coding agents is that it does multiple changes at the same time, right? And so it'll give you some helpful, some random, some destructive, but it'll all be in the same generation. And what that means is it's very difficult to parse which ones where the value is from the generation and where the consequences are of just accepting it. And so what really starts to happen is you start to have what I call the misalignment problem. So this inconsistent quality is just a symptom of the deeper problem, which is a misalignment issue. The problem isn't the code quality. The AI is great at writing code, but without alignment, it's not writing the correct code. Meaning the AI that literally just deleted the file for my other feature, it didn't understand where we were in the code base and where we're growing towards in the code base. And that's why I thought that other file was just, unnecessary, because it didn't really have that full context, that full alignment with me to understand my goals of building out this code base. The other thing that you don't like, I think it's really important, as a developer, if you're working on a production code base, that you understand the code you're writing, or at least the code that you're committing, right? Because if something goes down in production, it's kind of your ass on the line in a lot of ways. And so when you're just hitting accept all, accept all, accept all, you're lacking that deep understanding of what the code does. So it's here, it says like, you can accept the code, but do you understand it, right? Debugging is hard when the logic isn't yours. Debugging is hard in general, but debugging is damn near impossible when you just hit accept all 100 times and said, okay, I think the feature's done. You just have no underlying understanding of the foundation of your code base and the architecture. So that we understand what the issues are, I want to come back to this, and I want to repose this question. So what is the perfectly balanced vibes, right? So if the problem is alignment, what is the perfectly balanced vibes? Well, maybe the Goldilocks zone is coding with an aligned agent, right? And that's easier said than done. I agree. But yeah, today we're going to talk about my collaborative AI workflow, where I work with the AI and give it my human guidance at key critical points, so that we can that we have that alignment, that it really understands what I'm trying to do, and really helps augment the coding I would be doing by myself in the solo code mode. All right. So yes, the big question is how to align your agent, right? Now that we know that that's what we want to be doing, the question is how. So as we all mentioned, we're familiar with Cursor. There's something in Cursor called cursor rules. So what exactly are cursor rules? Well, cursor rules are kind of like a set of core instructions that can guide your agent whatever you want to do. There's kind of two different types of cursor rules. There's project-specific cursor rules that like live in your project and can be committed to your GitHub, and they're more so about the code base and talking through like, okay, this is how we've architected the code base. These types of files are here. Those types of files are there. If there's kind of a tricky thing that happens in the code base that's a little non-intuitive, so I'll explain it here. Then you have the other type of cursor rules, which are your personal cursor rules. Those live on your personal machine and they only apply, they don't really commit to your code base. They actually don't commit to your code base. And they kind of, they can be, they're yours, right? They're kind of specific to you as a developer and how you like to work with your coding agent. So today I'm going to walk you through my cursor rules and how I've built a strict process of collaboration with my coding agent. And so here's a QR code. This has my set of cursor rules on it. Don't worry if you don't scan it now. You can always scan it at the end of the presentation. We'll have the QR code again, or you can watch the recording and scan it then. But yeah, I don't like to, the issue with this slide is that like, you know, I haven't actually shown you why you'd want the cursor rules yet. I've just kind of put them in front of you, and you know, I like to explain why you'd want something before I sell it to you. So I don't scan it yet. Scan it at the end, because you know, I'll have to prove to you that it's worth scanning. All right, so there's kind of a bunch of steps here. We have 5 and then a little bug, which is a bonus. The first one is we start with kind of 4 key phases that I call either pre-development or the planning stages. And then we move to the 5th stage, which is the implementation stage. And if we get stuck along the way, we have the debugging methodology to get us out of, you know, the place where we don't want to be, which is, you know, stuck, I guess, blocked, you know, things breaking. So yeah, I'll walk through it quickly. So the first phase is our investigation and vision phase, where we kind of shape what we're going to build as a group. Next, we have the self-maintained grounding doc, where we basically, once we have our shape of what we want to build, we kind of crystallize it in this, dare I say, contract. Once we have that, we take kind of what we wanted to build, what we've shaped, and we break it down into individual kind of tickets, right? And then from here, we take the tickets and we kind of order them so that we're going in a proper, in a logical, you know, order. And we attach what I call verification checkpoints to them, so that at every stage, once we finish the task, we know exactly what it means to have this task actually successfully working, right? You can manually verify that the code is working, you know, either via like console logs, print statements, or even just UI clicking around and everything. So once we've done all of this, that concludes our kind of planning phases, and then we can move to implementation. So at this point, we have, you know, we have like these atomic changes listed out. We have them in order. We have checkpoints attached to them, and you know, implementation becomes a bit of a breeze, unless you know, hit a bug, and then you have to go with the debugging methodology. But the debugging methodology is actually very sophisticated as well, and can get you out of trouble pretty quickly, which is nice. So yeah, let's talk through the first key phase. The first one is the investigation and vision phase, right? So you're just kind of, you know, you spawn in, you open a new chat, and you say like, I want to build something today, right? Here you can just kind of start to, you know, you have nothing so far, but you have an idea, right? And so here you start to communicate your idea with your coding agent, and you guys start to what I call shape the idea together. Now we have, so that's the vision side of it. We also have another side of it called the investigation. So, you know, if you're building, you know, I like to use kind of the metaphor of an apple. So if you're shaping this apple, but this apple isn't really grounded in reality, right? It's just a bad vision. So the purpose of the investigation is to have my coding agent kind of do the groundwork to make sure that, you know, the vision that we're shaping is grounded in reality. So I can make it look through files in the code base to figure out like how we're going to integrate something into somewhere, or make it do research on, you know, popular packages that can do something. So I can have it do web research, code base research, and it can really dig up meaningful context for shaping this vision and making sure it's grounded in reality. So this is actually parts of the prompt. So here it says like, investigate the current code base to understand context, constraints, and existing patterns, and clarify what the new feature refactor should do. I like this one a lot. Ask clarifying questions about anything unclear. You know, You may understand it. You may think the AI understands it. The AI doesn't understand it. So it can ask you clarifying questions, which is super helpful. Search the code base for external and external docs as needed, or like the web, to surface findings that help shape the vision, right? That's really the purpose of that investigation piece. And yeah, finally, we have what I call a lock. So we have this like little note that says no code is written until we have complete alignment on the vision backed by our investigation notes. We call this crystallization. So you'll see that every phase in my workflow prompt has this idea of a lock where we don't progress until we kind of have alignment, or at least I think we have alignment. I mean, I guess the AI can tell me if it doesn't think we have alignment by asking clarifying questions as well, right? So yeah, once we have this alignment, or we're 95% there, then we move on to crystallization, or what I call building our self-maintained grounding dock. So yeah, I've been kind of rethinking like exactly what this grounding dock is. I'll tell you a little bit about it, and then I'll tell you some of the new names that I've come up with. So it's written and maintained by the agent. So you're not actually writing. So it's a markdown file. It's really a markdown file of our goals and our visions, and a bunch of other things that we'll add to it as we move along the development process. It's written and maintained by the agent, but it's still edited and audited by you, and that's really the most important part. This ends up being the only file that I have linked in the chat. So if you ever used Cursor, you can link certain files in the chat to give it context. This ends up being the only file that I have linked to it in the chat, because I have this piece down here, which is relevant code files. Basically, I'm linking those in my grounding doc so that if my agent is ever curious and wants to go explore and learn more about the code base, it kind of has this starting point to go dig further. And that's why I can get away with this being the only file that I have linked in the chat. The grounding doc always begins with our crystallized vision that we just kind of came up with, or maybe it can begin with research before you have the crystallized vision, which is helpful as well. Some of the things that I like to put in my beginning of the contract, or the vision, right, is high level vision, kind of core objectives, UI UX principles, constraints, out of scope items, open and resolved questions, and like I just mentioned, one of the most important parts, relevant code files. Another note about this is, once you have your grounding doc, it doesn't end there. It's an ongoing documentation. And so I kind of think of it as like an append only approach. So here's where I'll talk about some of the other names that have been coming up for this document. Another name I call it is like a feature timeline or a development ledger. The idea here is that you're kind of building this, immutable record of originally the shape of what we're going to build, and then as we start to work through the document, we just kind of add more to it. So this document will follow us through the rest of the development process. So when we move to the breakdown, so as you can see, we have the vision here. That's cool. As we move to the breakdown, we'll add the breakdown there. As we move to ordering, we'll add the ordering there. As we move to checkpoints, we'll move checkpoints there. I also like to log my progress in there, which is great too. And if I'm ever going to take a break, like go get lunch, or going to take a weekend off, or even switch to a whole different code base for a while, I typically log handoff notes between sessions that are good for not just orienting maybe the next coding agent in a new chat back into it, but also good for helping reorient myself to it as well. So this could be like a summary of progress, next steps, and key context whenever pausing. This is a super valuable. If you take one thing away from this talk, this is probably the thing to take away. It's super helpful whenever you're kind of like building a feature to be building out this kind of key document, this ledger, this timeline to help follow you through your development process, because it's also super valuable whenever you're going to build the next feature, right? You can pass in your old grounding docs in as context, and so you can have, it's kind of like a very easy way to orient your agent as to where you're going in the code base. So that hopefully, if you had, like, I kind of going back to where we originally started with my coding agent deleting a file from an unrelated feature, if I had passed in the feature docs from those previous features, it would have understood from the start why it shouldn't be deleting that other file, right? That like it understands like, okay, we already built this. We don't want to, delete this, things like that. So super big key point I wanted to just hone in. So once we have, now we have our apple shaped, we've grounded in reality. So it's kind of like on the floor. Now we want to do is cut the apple up into smaller bite-sized pieces. And this is really the ticket breakdown. So really we take So I have the AI propose a plan, list tasks and tickets needed, break multi-step tasks into clear sub-steps, refine with my feedback until confirmed, and do not proceed until the breakdown is approved. There again, you can see I have another lock on, before we continue, we have to be on the same page, or at least I have to feel like we're on the same page. So now we have our apple. We've shaped our apple. We have it on the ground. We've chopped it up into small pieces. Now we have to decide which apple do we eat first, which piece do we eat second, et cetera, et cetera. So here I have two concepts, ordering and checkpoints. Ordering is the idea of choosing kind of like which apple piece we're going to eat first. But the cooler concept here is checkpoints. So when you're working with generative AI, everyone talks about generation, but no one talks about the actual work that we do. What we do is the work for us is not generating code, it's verifying generations. So what checkpoints does is it's kind of like basically in the plan saying, this is how we'll verify each of these, atomic changes as we write code. So I'm basically embedding the verification into the plan. And it makes it very easy once we hit implementation. So I can say like, oh yes, make the code change. It makes the code change. Tell me how to verify it. We already have it documented. So it just checks the plan. It'll tell me how to verify it. I can easily check it in the UI or, in the browser console, however, and then I can be like, okay, we passed verification, which is really cool. So propose an execution order and attach a testable checkpoint to each task. Explain briefly why this order is optimal. Wait for my explicit sign off on both the order and the checkpoint before any coding begins. I want to make another note that something that I've been learning recently, if you start to okay, so I have like these 30 slices of the apple, and this is going to be the first slice, and this is going to be the second slice, this is going to be the eighth slice, and this is going to be the 30th slice. Well, if you start planning 30 steps down the line, that can be a lot of mental cognitive load. So I've started to work more on this concept of what I call penciling things in. In the early part of your plan, what really matters is really maybe your first 3 steps, maybe your first 5 steps. Step 100 doesn't matter yet because it's all theoretical. So there's no point in like really getting very granular on what step 100 looks like. So I use this concept called penciling in. So I'll really focus on like the first couple pieces that I think are important, and I'll leave like the next 25, 30 kind of penciled in. And then I'll typically like to zoom in and like really hone in on those first 5. So I kind of have like this concept of like penciling in the things that are farther out and then zooming in to things that are right in front of me that are really pertinent right now. And then once you finish those 5, you can kind of zoom back out, look back at your plan, reintegrate, and then kind of zoom back into those next 5. It's a much simpler for us. It's also simpler for the AI because we're not biting off more than we can chew. Back to the Apple analogy. All right, so now that we hit implementation, we already have a really granular plan here. We have, we have our apple, it's grounded, we've chopped it up. We know the first few pieces that we're gonna bite. We've also come up with a plan of how we're going to verify that we've actually successfully eaten each piece of those first 5. And so now we kind of on autopilot in a lot of ways. Typically, the way that I like to do implementation is I have like a 4-step process. So first, we're about to do our first task. I typically say, explain to me in the chat what this task is. The AI will break down the task and be like, okay, from the plan, this is kind of what's going to happen. This is how I'm going to structure this. I'm going to structure that. I'll breeze through it. If it looks good, I'll say, okay, make the changes. So the first step is discuss the task. The second step is make the changes. The third step is I'll verify the changes. Now, either one of 2 things will happen. Either the verification will be successful or the verification will be unsuccessful. Verification is unsuccessful, move to the debugging methodology. Verification is successful. I have the AI log what we've done in our grounding doc from before. And then I typically like to make a commit shortly after because it's really important to be, not relying on Cursor to hold your state and for you to be relying on GitHub to kind of, make sure that you're committing, the valuable code so that you can lean on all of the version controlling from Git. So that's kind of another thing. Yeah. And so what happens when, you fail a verification? Great question. We have my favorite phase, which is the debugging methodology. This one is fantastic. So, I want to say one more thing about implementation. So we said work task by task, step by step. Sure. Make small incremental code changes. Sure. This is a big one. After each change, pause and summarize what was done. There can be a lot of, and here I'll read the next one as well. Always ask for permission before moving from one implementation step to the next. A big problem with coding agents, that are kind of raw coding agents and don't have these kind of guardrails in place, is they'll finish one change and they'll just start working on the next, and they'll start working on the next. Before you know it, it'll do 6 things in a row. Maybe the first 2 were good, maybe the fourth is good, but 3, 5, and 6 are not good, right? Well, how do you keep, 1, 2, and 4 and get rid of 3, 5, and 6? You have to throw away the entire generation and restart, which is just annoying and it's expensive, to be honest. So this is like a really key thing, is like forcing the AI, another lock system here, another locking guardrail to say, like, let's just go one by one. All right, now back to debugging methodology. So this is the debugging methodology is like everything that I wish I had the patience to do when I'm debugging something. So the best case scenario for me is when hunting bugs, always identify the root cause, right? We don't want the shallow cause, we want the root cause. And even better than that, I should provide code evidence or snippets that prove it, right? Not only do we want the root cause, we want proof of the root cause. A great thing for me to do would be to search the code base for additional context regularly, right? So don't just assume things, verify it, search deeply through the code base and make sure that I'm on the right track. Next, suggest multiple hypotheses for the root cause, because it's probably never the first thing that comes to mind. So not only do I do this for the first one, but I should do all this for multiple hypotheses of the root cause and reason about which hypotheses seem most likely given the evidence. If you notice yourself recommending the same theory multiple times, take a step back and zoom out. So like I said, these are all the things that I would be doing if I had perfect patience when debugging. But as we all know, that when you're debugging and things don't work, that adrenaline starts to kick in. You just start doing things. Before you know it, you can be 3 hours into a rabbit hole and just frustrated and upset. And the last thing you want to do is, you want to find the root cause. The last thing you want to do is provide code evidence, zoom out, suggest multiple hypotheses, and reason about which hypothesis seems most likely given the evidence. So, we can make our perfectly patient agents do it for us. It's fantastic. Typically, the way that I invoke the debugging methodology, if my agent is like just kind of, oh, I think this is it, I'll do it for you. Oh, I think this is it, I'll do it for you. I say, here, take a moment, stop, use the debugging methodology. And that kind of like resets it and it goes, I remember the debugging methodology. Okay, let me try with code evidence. Let me dig. Let me give you a bunch of options, and I'll stop making code changes left and right willy-nilly, and we can actually have a sophisticated conversation. All right. So at this point, you've seen my entire workflow. Hopefully you found it valuable. And I'll tell you a little bit about my experiences from before the workflow prompt, or my cursor rules if you want to get technical, and after. So before the workflow prompt, I went from idea, I dove directly into coding it. That led to a ton of chaos, which led to even more refactoring. And a constant, experience that I had was, yelling at my agent and saying, "What the heck did you just do to my code base?" Some people have said harsher words, I've been told. We were constantly going in tangents. There was a bunch of scope creep, and there's rabbit holes because, you're not on the same page. And the AI is like, oh, you just tweaked some UI here. You probably want to change this UI and that UI, and you probably want to redo your entire layout, don't you? It's like, no, I never said that. Please don't do that. But it'll just start doing it because, it's doing 6 changes in a row, and the first 3 are good, and the second 3 are downright destructive. So bug fixing becomes a full second time job, which is a bit of a joke. But realistically, right, planning to dev ratio, you're doing about 20% planning and 80% dev, mostly damage control. So really what this looks like is 20% planning, and then maybe about 10%, development, and then the next 70% is all debugging, which is miserable. Or even really like bringing it back to your original plan because you never communicated with the agent. So more maybe like also like debugging and refinement or polish, but it's really just like doing the actual thing. After the workflow, we started with idea, we moved to investigate, clarify, and align. And then once we are fully aligned, then we execute. And so instead of going from, what the heck did you do to my code base, we're now more in, I know it's coming, and because we already agreed on the plan. Each task has a checkpoint and verification. So drift gets caught very early, which is the best part of this whole entire project or this whole entire process. Debugging is precise and grounded in evidence, which is beautiful. And the planning to dev ratio is like 70 to 30. That's not because planning is taking an insane amount of time. I mean, planning does take a while, but really what's happening is dev is just becoming a bit of a breeze, right? Like people say, like, what prompt are you using to code? Like, well, once you've generated kind of like a spec or a contract, right? The only prompt you have to do when you code is like, it'll be like, hey, do you want me to make this change? You say YES, enter. And then it makes the change. You say, how should I verify? And then I'll tell you how to verify. You check it. If it's successful, you say, and it says, do you want me to log what we just completed together? You say YES, enter. Like those are my coding prompts these days. If you do enough planning, it's very, very, very blissful, which is kind of a funny way to define coding. So I want to take a step back and talk about how I got here. So my original cursor rules, as probably many people are, is they were really what first, meaning in the early days of cursor and code generation and having a chat window in your your IDE, it was only generating a function at a time, or it was completing a function for you, right? It was doing the scope was very small. And so I think it was important, right, to talk more about the syntax we wanted for this function, right? So that the code is generating is easy to understand. So my original cursor rules were like add comments, use the KISS principles, prioritize readable code. They were surface level instructions about the output. But what changed was we stopped going from this autocomplete. We started going to agent mode, which is like, think of me as a full software engineer that can build your entire feature for you, and so you never have to really type any code yourself. And that's a very different thing from autocomplete to AI software engineer, right? But my cursor rules stayed the same. And so I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, if this thing is now an AI software engineer, why are my cursor rules not adapting, right? The way that I do real teamwork is very different, right? With human engineers, I never micromanage formatting. We discuss the vision, the purpose, and the outcomes. We don't discuss semicolons and brackets. And so there's a key mindset shift here, more towards how first, meaning I started focusing on how we collaborate to build software as a team. I started treating AI as a thought partner and teammate rather than just a code generator. So that's the big difference, right? I stopped writing them about those adding comments and kind of like the syntax, and started talking not even about, what I want the feature. So, I mean, this is my process, right? My cursor rules, right? So I started really focusing on our collaborative process, as you saw. I think just kind of, this is kind of a tangent, but I think it's really cool how, Cursor working with these coding agents went from unworkable, entirely unworkable, unusable, super destructive, something that I was honestly scared to touch. I was just using kind of not vibey enough, right? Where I was just using ChatGPT to answer debugging questions. And I was still, copying, at least writing every line myself, copy and pasting every line myself, but I was still the one committing the changes. To this thing that I can heavily rely on and really trust. And I think what's cool about it is really nothing changed except the prompt. So it's kind of cool. It's like just plain English. One block of carefully crafted instructions transformed this entire product experience for me. There was no model updates. It's the same AI, the same code base, the same features. Nothing technical changed at all. And what it led to was a complete redefinition of the product. The entire product experience shifted fundamentally for me as a user. And I think that there's something fundamental in here where this idea of nothing technical changed at all is a lie, because the prompts did change. And I think it's time we start thinking of the prompts as code, as the prompts as technology. Because in Andre Karpathy, the guy who came up with vibe coding, in his famous words, the new hottest coding language is English. All right, I'll kind of skip through this. This is more for corporate people. I guess we're kind of corporate, so I'll run it. Fun police. How do we manage security when working with LLM code gen tools? So first off, you have cursor ignore, your first line of defense. So you can ignore, like, for example, .env and other, anytime you have keys in your code base, it's good to use cursor ignore. Something else I just realized is cursor automatically. So what is ignore? What it does is basically it blocks secrets and sensitive files from indexing. It also prevents them from leaking into your LLMs. So you really don't want like an LLM seeing all of your keys. So this basically prevents those from being sent off to the LLM API. But what's cool about it is cursor automatically, cursor ignores your git ignore as well. So if you are git ignoring your keys and everything, you're already safe. Yeah, cursor can't see those. So you kind of don't need a cursor ignore as long as you have a git ignore, which I think most of us have especially in our production code bases. A few notes about privacy. There's a few different privacy modes. So you have privacy mode off, which all data is stored, and they basically are training on your code base, which you probably don't want. There's privacy mode on. They don't train on your code base. This is a great idea. There's a few deeper ones, but realistically, this is the one you want. Just turn the privacy mode on so they don't train on your code base. Yeah, and if you run an org, there's a few different options. You have the individual, team, business, and enterprise options. With individual, you have to manually configure your privacy settings. With team and business, you can force the new privacy mode org-wide. You also can set up SSO. With enterprise, you also get SOC 2, Type 2, audit logs, and you have access control APIs, so you can, like, when someone leaves your company, you can like quickly kick them out of your cursor, and you can also force SSO. All right, so now we've kind of talked through my original problem with the raw agent mode, how I solved it with my collaborative prompt, and we also talked about security, but that's boring stuff. So there's kind of a new problem here, right? There's a lot of planning involved before you can actually build. And so the original problem was the agent ran wild with too many assumptions, changes were chaotic and unpredictable, and trust broke down as alignment failed. The solution was the 5-phase prompt, but there's a new problem. Alignment still remains a bit of a schlep. Even with structure, detailed communication takes time, and feeling truly synced requires a lot of deliberate effort. So the next question is kind of how can we speed up our pre-dev alignment process? Well, it's kind of simple, right? How do you sync, how do you typically collaborate with your teammates, right? We use our voice. So, you can unlock speed with voice. So why type when you can ramble? The question I constantly ask myself. But it's really cool here. So when you have the structured foundation, you can increase your velocity by using your voice. Together, you add them together and you get a rapid, grounded development process with both speed and precision. And so this is kind of how I use voice today. So let's say, for example, my cursor's asking me clarifying questions. My coding agent is asking me clarifying questions. Here they just list out 5. This is only like the first half of the questions they asked me. You kind of have a few ways you can approach this, right? Let's say, the simplest way to approach it is to read all the questions and type your answers out. The next more advanced way, or voice first way, is to read all the questions and then use what I call super whisper. Well, it's actually a thing called super whisper. It's basically like speech to text, but like runs locally on your machine, uses the whisper model locally. It's like really good speech to text. So you can use speech to text to just kind of, ramble about the answers to all these things. The final thing that I actually do is I'll actually start the recording first, then read the questions. And as I read through the questions, I'll answer them in real time. And the reason why this is important is because with the first approach, you're typing everything. With the second approach, you're pre-auditing the questions and then giving your answers. But with the third approach, you're kind of getting almost caught off guard by the questions, right? So when someone on your team asks you a tough question, you don't like say, I'll get back to you in a day, to process it, right? You just start rambling with them. You say like, okay, well, we could do this, we could do that. Actually, I think the right answer is something in between. We'll do this, right? And so they don't just get to see the solution, they also get to see your thought process. And that's very valuable context for them to see how you're thinking, so that they can develop how they think, right? And yeah, and it's also valuable context for the agent as well. So yeah, when I start record and then I read this question, it catches me off guard. I kind of travel through the idea maze, and I don't just deliver the solution, but I also deliver my thinking patterns, and that's very valuable for the AI to kind of see that. And it's yeah. So alignment at the speed of ramble, use Super Whisper and Cursor Chat. Everyone should definitely check out Super Whisper. Highly recommend. They have I'm using the free version. It's really good. Works great on Mac. Also, some people when they text, they're not, typing every thought that they have out. They're just, kind of shortening it as much as they can to more of like a single command, right? And instead, I'm using full paragraphs. In short, my alignment time gets cut in half, and yeah, it's a big deal. I also love like the advanced voice mode in ChatGPT where you can like have like a proper call with an AI, and I hope that Cursor builds that someday soon. That'd be awesome. So yeah, here I'm really going to end the conversation. This is kind of a full circle moment where I went from skeptic. I started out, ready to give up on agent mode entirely. And from there, I went to a believer that I can now trust it. I can now trust my coding agent to ship real code in my production environments. And this has all been enabled by the structured collaboration that we have, through my 5-phase workflow prompt that you'll be able to get on the next page. And I was also able to speed up that alignment process with voice. And ChatGPT generated this quote that I just think is so corny, but I love it. The stallion I couldn't ride became a teammate that I can rely on. All right, and I have a little, call to action for you. So now it's your turn. Steal my coding prompt. You can get it right here. Try building at the speed of Ramble. Download Super Whisper and try voice dictation in Cursor. And finally, you can join my ODevs community called Build the Future. Yeah, I can probably put something in the Discord so you can join it. You can also just go on the ODevs website, scroll to the bottom. You'll see a link to my community, which is called Build the Future. So yeah, really, our mission is to build a community for sharing field notes on how to leverage AI to become the 100x version of ourselves. So thank you so much for your time. Hopefully you learned something. Would love to see you at Build the Future. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. There's been a lot of questions in the chat. And so I'm going to also allow folks to unmute themselves if they want to ask questions live to you. But if you can see the chat, you've got a couple here. Let me just kind of starting from the top, kind of looking for suggestions around writing test cases to do to test regression, wondering if the rules work in other locations like Claude Code. Some about where you put instructions into Cursor. So I don't know if you want to kind of go top to bottom here or.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Caitlin. I'm gonna pass this one to you so you can spoon feed me. You've been seeing them longer than I have.
Yeah, well, I'll go with the most current one. So Andy just kind of asked, the rules doc seems rather long. Does it eat up a lot of tokens? And kind of adds a little bit more context. Yeah, that's your first question there. So.
What eats up a lot of tokens is generating bad code and having to undo it. It also eats up a lot of time and makes you annoyed. So, I mean, it eats up, a number of tokens, but I don't think it's not noticeable compared to how much time and energy it'll save you.
There you go.
But that's like a trade-off, right? Like you'll get more tokens eaten, but you'll also get better outputs, right? There's a trade-off there.
Another question is just around security. So wondering at sort of your organization permitting collaborative coding, how do you, how do you manage like sensitive or proprietary code?
Yeah, I mean, that's really where the cursor ignore comes in. But I work in a startup, so it's obviously a very different environment than, if you're in government or like healthcare or finance. So I don't know, but I'm a startup environment, and I don't really think too much about that, just because the big thing for us is like, hey, please just don't train on our code. And so yeah, by turning privacy mode on in Cursor and leveraging the cursor ignore, that pretty much solves that for us.
Awesome. Another question, do you find that the more you vibe code, the more efficient you become?
That's a great question. Want to respond? I don't vibe code. This is agent assisted coding, right? Because I am still very aware of the every line that makes it into my code base, and I'm really driving that kind of spec up front. So yeah, I just want to this is the vibe coding part is like a play on words, maybe. But yes, I would say I do, right? I think every time I code, I love it, right? Because every time I code, I tweak my process a little bit. I try new things. Something that I'm working on now, right, is just kind of come back to this idea is, I think recently I had this idea of like kind of the 4-phase implementation plan where we first start with, discuss the change we want to make the change. Either, we now tell me the verification steps. Either we verify it or we don't, and then log what we've solved together. So that was like kind of like a new development for me. Kind of the zooming and the penciling in, to reduce my cognitive load has been a new development for me. Something that I'm kind of up next for me is, I think you said there might have been another question about testing or something like that. So when we're doing the verification steps, I've always thought of them as more manual tests, where like they're like kind of like one-time things. Like as I build, give me a simple manual test, like test. But what I started to think about was like, hey, like all these manual tests, if they were codified, they'd be great unit tests. And I should be, building a test suite as I'm developing, right? And so I think it's really cool. So my next thing I'm going to try to do is kind of build a test suite as verification, right? As I go, instead of like, okay, let me build a feature and then let me build a test suite. More so like, every single time we add a feature, we're building into that test suite, and we can, anytime we make we want to test and make a large change, we can just run that test suite, and now we have potentially hundreds of, every single atomic change should have its own, verification step, and therefore should have its own kind of atomic test to go with it. So that's really exciting as well. So yeah, I'm constantly learning every time I code. I'm tweaking my process, and yeah, I think I would say I'm getting better at vibe coding every time I vibe code.
That's awesome. I think there's a couple of questions that are encouraging you to do a live demo, which I'm not sure is feasible, but throwing it out there. But also just like using the rules efficiently. Are they in different, groups of rules in different section of the rules file? Do you put them in, in a certain way for cursor to follow them? So I think a little bit more about like how your rules are directly applied for effect.
Yeah, I can hit both of those. So yeah, there's not time today to do a live demo, but at Build the Future, my shameless plug, right? And at my ODevs community, I had the same response. I think everyone who sees this talk, they're like, okay, this is great in theory. I want to see it actually in real life. So we've been doing a series where I'm kind of call like my live vibe coding demo, where we've been building a feature together in one of my side projects. And so I think 2 months ago we did the first installment of that series where I did my visioning and investigation phase. Last month I did my breakdown and my ordering phase, and then this month will be the most fun phase where we actually do implementation. And so yeah, it's actually going to be this Thursday at Credo Conduit. Maybe Caitlin can help share out some information in the Discord. So please
You've
come.
already gotten 3 new signups for your meetup since I shared the link. So
I feel famous. But yeah, so come by, get your live demo. You'll enjoy it. And we also have fun. We get to meet each other. We get to share field notes for like, even if you're not a developer, let's say you're in sales, if you're leveraging AI tools, I want to know about it. There's probably other people that want to know about it. So we also get to share field notes on, whatever domain we are in, as long as we're AI first. We just get to share tips on how we leverage AI, since there are no best practices yet. There's only emerging practices. And, we all see the practices emerging a little differently for ourselves. Back to the next question. How do we implement the rules? Well, Cursor has a handy dandy. So when I first added my rules in, there was only one rules section. Now you can have like a bunch of small rules if you want to do it. I think they're encouraging small rules. I still just have one lumped in rule. So that's what I do. It's not that difficult to add it. I don't know exactly how it works in Windsurf or in VS Code, but I know in Cursor it's pretty simple to add it in. Oh yeah, the live meetup will be that'll be at Credo Conduit, which is I think kind of like the home of ODevs in my mind. Yeah, so you can easily find information on that. Yeah, I think I would say the important thing is that you have your rules in there. I don't know how important it is that they're split up and broken up. The thing is, I would say like my coding agent doesn't always know them, kind of top of mind. But if I say like, what do you see in your cursor rules? It'll like mention it and it'll kind of bring it to front of mind, and we can like kind of go from there. You just have to like kind of remind it to it. Similar with like the debugging methodology, it'll just start debugging its own way until I say, please use the debugging methodology. It reminds itself what that is, and then it will do it that way.
I think you hit all the questions here. So, just a reminder to everyone that Alex gave a talk at our ODevs main meetup. So encourage you to join us there. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter yet, please do so. I'll put a link in the chat just now for the most recent event, live events in Orlando. We have many live events in Orlando. So Alex's group, Build the Future, is meeting this Thursday in downtown Orlando at the Conduit. The ODevs main meetup had a meetup last week. We meet typically the last Wednesday of the month, so we are meeting on August 27th. ODevs actually has 12 meetup groups underneath us. So the Orlando Lady Devs group is meeting next Wednesday. The Orlando Innovation League is meeting the week after that. The DevOps group is meeting on a weekend in there. So many groups. If you haven't followed us, please do so. We've got the Orlando Devs website that has links to all 12 of our groups. Also, please follow our newsletter. We're doing a mix of these in-person and online sessions. So also feedback is really welcome. We're just trying to figure out how to make our community as accessible as possible. You can also join us in Discord and keep the conversation going there. We have a very lively AI channel going on. Yeah, so all the links are in the chat. Thank you everyone for attending. This was recorded, so we will be sharing it out to folks who RSVP'd, and then we'll be linking it out in our newsletter in the future. So huge thank you to you, Alex, and thanks to everyone for attending.
Huge thank you to you, Caitlin. You're doing a great job running ODevs. I know it's not easy.